Torah Life Ministries come out of the world. Messiah people seek the truth.
Hello everybody, it's Paul Neeson with Torah Life Ministries. I came up to a person, I found their teachings online, Joel Richardson. And I'm so excited because here I am at this conference. He's here also, and we're going to have him on Torah Life Ministries today, talking about a lot of the Islamic ways of life and thinking versus the Western Christian mindset. So we're going to have those right now. All right, everybody, welcome to Torah Life Ministries. Here we are with Joel Richardson. Joel, why don't you introduce yourself to Torah Life Ministries?
Well, I'm Joel Richardson from the Midwest, author of a book called Islamic Antichrist, and essentially teaching on issues such as the role of Islam in the end times.
Okay, now I have to ask, because this is Torah Life Ministries, what prompted you to write books on such a topic?
Well, it began with, first it began with a love for Israel, and then out of that came a love for Muslims. And actually, on a personal level, when I first got saved 20 years ago, I have a naturally evangelistic personality. I found that most Westerners don't like to talk about God or the Bible or that sort of thing. And eventually I met these people called Muslims, and they will talk to you about God and Jesus, Yeshua, the Bible, all of these things anytime, all day long. And so I fell in love with them. And so through a series of events, I felt called early on to reach out to the Muslims. And then coming out of that, out of years of that, really shortly after 9/11, I was just studying what Muslims teach about the end times, and that was really what sort of turned the corner for me.
Well, now let's talk about a couple of things, because first you said you wanted to reach out to the Muslims, and this is what, before you kind of knew what they were teaching about the end times. So how did you approach them, and how were you trying to reach out to them?
Well, that's what's so fantastic about Muslims is all you have to do is just begin a conversation and tell them you're a Christian, and they'll be happy to engage you and talk. And most Christians are far more trained than the average Christian or Messianic believer to engage Christians and challenge Christians. And I'm just an individual who's not usually apt to back down to a theological challenge. So I would meet some guy from Indonesia that speaks 6 languages, that has a thorough grasp on issues such as Aramaic primacy or some complex theological issue, and he would challenge me. And so I would be on Amazon getting all the books, and I'm going to come back with an answer. And really it was through just years of that type of engagement and dialogue that led into really the place that I'm at now.
Wow, well, so many people out there have such a lack of knowledge when it comes to what the Muslims teach about end-time prophecy, and they just believe everything they hear in the news. But so many people don't realize the similarities and the differences between the Bible and the Quran. But you have studied this out, and I've heard you speak before, and why don't you share a little with people believe, because the Christians, the average Christian out there, they don't even know their own religion, forget about the Muslim faith. So why don't you share some of the important points that you think everyone needs to be aware of?
Yeah, well, essentially, in a nutshell, the Bible teaches that in the last days there would be an evil man, we call him the Antichrist, that would gather together a coalition of nations, invade the land of Israel, kill a significant portion of the inhabitants of the land. That's called Jacob's trouble. And in the midst of this darkest hour, the Messiah returns. He delivers those that are surviving, those that are left. We call that the remnant. He comes to rule over the earth from Jerusalem. That's sort of the end times biblical story in a nutshell. Well, Islam teaches that in the last days a Muslim Messiah figure would rise up. He would gather together a coalition of Muslim nations. He would reunite the Islamic world, and he would lead the Islamic world in an invasion against the land of Israel. Specifically, Muslims are taught that this figure, this Messiah figure known as the Mahdi, some people call him the 12th Imam. That's what you'll hear a lot in the news. That is a reference specifically to the Shia Muslim. That's the minority sect of Muslims in terms of what they believe with this character. But we should call him the Mahdi. That's a catch-all for what all Muslims, Sunnis and Shia, believe. And they're taught that the Mahdi would specifically rule the earth from Jerusalem, that he would conquer the land of Israel for Islam, that he would take it back from the Jews, and that he would literally cause the whole world to become Muslim from his seat of authority on the Temple Mount.
Wow, when you say take it back from the Jews, what does that mean? Is that, when you say take it back, what are you referencing to there?
From the Islamic mindset, of course, their belief is that it was rightfully theirs because they conquered it in the 7th century under the caliphate of Caliph Umar. Umar, I believe it was Umar, who came in and conquered Jerusalem. Because it was conquered with Muslim blood, they believe it is rightfully theirs, and because now it's controlled by the Jews, they believe that it's their divine destiny to actually take it back.
Well, that's so interesting, and people need to study this out more. But, what I find interesting is that I heard a Muslim speaking once, and he said, Americans have no idea about faith because they have such a lack of it, even so-called believers. But they said they can't understand Muslims because it's part of their DNA almost, at least the faithful Muslims. And what's your opinion from your understanding and viewpoint of the difference of faith a Christian has towards so-called Christianity versus a Muslim having towards their Quran?
Yeah, toward Islam in general. Well, see, Muslims will always tell you, if you just pick up Islam for Dummies, it'll say clearly that Islam is a comprehensive system of life. So they don't have the ideas that we have, such as the separation between church and state. They don't have the idea of secular life and religious life. For them, Islam is something that encompasses everything from hygiene to religious beliefs, theology, what do you believe about the nature of God, the nature of salvation, all of those things. We tend to sort of cubbyhole religion into the discussion of theology and then how that applies to our morals. But to the Muslim, it is all-encompassing. And again, in the Western mind, we've sort of categorized different arenas of life. To the Muslim, it's military, it's legal, it's hygiene, it's theology, it's governance, all of these things. And for the Christian, I believe it should encompass to the believer, those that believe in Jesus and Yeshua. Our belief should encompassing all of our lives. Now, with the one qualifier, because we're in the age that we're in now, I don't believe it is the job of the believer to take over the world, to take over government, to impose our laws. I believe according to the Bible, we are to now proclaim the coming of the Messianic kingdom. When he comes, when the supernatural man comes forth from heaven, he will take over the earth and he will impose divine system of laws and governance. But that is not the job of the believer today, because there are many believers in the believing community that believe that we need to take over the government and enforce Christian law, so to speak, onto the earth. That time will come, but it will come under the Messiah. It's not yet. So Muslims have this concept of the caliphate. That's the Islamic government. They are trying to take over the earth. Right now, the issue in the earth is the caliphate versus the kingdom of God. We need to be boldly proclaiming the coming Messianic kingdom of God on the earth. It's far more inviting than the caliphate when the rights of mankind are crushed.
So do you believe both can be done at the same time or no?
What elaborate?
In terms of proclaiming Yeshua as Messiah and while also taking over the government and so on.
I believe our job, I believe that anytime the church has tried to take over government, it results in catastrophe. So I believe that we are to be salt and light, we are to be witnesses in this age, even to the point of death, even of the point to loving the world and proclaiming the goodness and the coming of God, even unto death, to the shedding of our blood. But any time that the believing community on the earth thinks that it's their job to physically take over law, military, and government, it always results in catastrophe. We always fail, is the answer. The day will come when Messiah will do those things and we will be under his authority. We will do that in a divine system, but I don't believe we should cross that line today. We should fight for justice and all of these things, but when it crosses the line to taking over laws, I think that that we fall into the error of the Catholic Church.
Well, and the Muslims having this lifestyle where they don't separate these things, everything's part of their belief system. Didn't the Christians believe that way at first?
Well, to a degree they did, but again, what it all falls down to is the nature of the kingdom of God. You know, when Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my disciples would fight. So it's not as though fighting is wrong. It's just not right now. We're in the age specifically where God is extending mercy to mankind. We're in the age of what I call invitation. Some people call it the age of amnesty. He is presently withholding justice. He is withholding judgment. And oftentimes as a result of that, we think something's wrong. We go, why do I not see justice? Why do I not see righteousness being leveled on behalf of those that are suffering? The day will come when justice will be executed. We are in the age of turning the cheek. We defer justice to the day of the Lord. The day of justice is coming, but it is not our job to enforce through military action justice at this point. We need to support our governments and pray for righteous leadership and that sort of thing. We need to be salt and light, but complicated theological issues. But I'm convinced that our job now is to long and wait for the coming of the Messiah, the day of justice, when righteousness will cover the earth, and the knowledge of God will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. And those that have destroyed the earth, the unrighteous leaders, the unrighteous governmental leaders and the politicians, according to Psalm 110, will literally be crushed by the Messiah when he comes, and he will reestablish and place righteous leadership throughout the earth. He will do that with those that were humble, with those that were meek, not those that were selfishly ambitious, seeking their own glory. Those that exalt themselves in this age at the day of the Lord will be humiliated and humbled. The lowly, the meek, the weak, the forgotten, the victimized that have patiently waited for the Messiah, they'll be exalted on that day.
What's your opinion about where in the Muslim faith, they will put to death somebody who doesn't believe what they believe and will not conform to their standards? But in the Bible it says, we are to do the same thing. Somebody that's teaching a message against the scriptures, that we are to put them to the sword. What's your opinion of that? How do you translate that or think about? What do you think about that?
I'm going to have to defer to the example of Jesus and Paul, where a woman's brought to Yeshua and he says, let him who is without sin cast the first stone. In the Corinthian congregation, there were individuals that were involved in adultery. Rather than stoning them, Paul turned their flesh over to Satan to be chastised. Again, in the age of the Messiah, these things will be carried out, but they will be carried out by one who is worthy to carry them out. They will be carried out by one who is completely righteous, unlike myself, or unlike any time man, no matter how given to prayer and holiness he is, anytime the believing community attempts to impose this sort of thing, I believe that it's never going to be pure. And thus I do wait for the day when righteousness and justice will be carried out throughout the earth. But I don't want to be the one responsible for it.
So would you say it's fair to say that one of the major differences between Islam and so-called Christianity, or at least the faith of Christianity, would be the mercy of Messiah?
Well, yeah, absolutely. The pinnacle throughout the scriptures of who God is, his character, is seen in the cross. He is the God who comes down out of heaven. He condescended and he embraced this state of being and suffered for us in order to show us who he is, how much he loves us. Whereas in Islam is a thoroughly anti-incarnational faith, which says this: far be it from Allah that he would have a son. In other words, far be it from God that he would ever condescend to mankind. Now they'll say that Allah is merciful, Bismillah ar-Rahim ar-Rahman, he's the most merciful and the most compassionate. But then when that's actually carried out into reality, it doesn't bear in terms of the way that Islam is practiced. He is the God that refuses to humble himself. He refuses. Paul, just earlier I saw you running around playing with your daughter, acting like a goof. Woo! That's what our God is like. He humbles himself because he loves us. The God of Islam is the one that says, I'm too dignified, I'm too majestic to humble myself to love my children. That's the difference between the God of Islam and the God of the Bible. There is no length that he wouldn't go to express his love to his own creation, to redeem his creation to himself.
Wonderful. Two more quick topics here. What do you think, what's your opinion of replacement theology?
I think it's one of the greatest sources of evil in the history of the believing community, in the history of the church. It comes from a Greek philosophical, Platonic, or Gnostic mindset which says that the physical realm is essentially evil, and then this immaterial Greek heaven is purely good. And as a result of that philosophy that crept into the church through the Alexandrian school in the early years, it infected Christianity with this idea, this Greek philosophical worldview. And so then when you have this idea of a physical kingdom of God on the earth, they said, how can that be? It's impossible. The physical realm is bad. And so now we have a whole religion that teaches that your ultimate destiny is to someday die and go to heaven in some immaterial realm in the clouds. And the fact of the matter is, our ultimate destiny is a very physical, tangible place on the earth with the Messiah ruling over us. Heaven and earth become one under his leadership. That's what the Bible teaches.
Now, for those that don't understand replacement theology, why don't you briefly explain it?
Well, essentially, replacement theology says that this concept of a physical, tangible body of people known as Israel ruling over the earth, with Messiah over them, that's impossible. And so when believers look to the Old Testament, Christians look to the Old Testament, and they see the word Israel, they say that's a spiritual term. It's not literal, it's spiritual, and it's referring to the church. It's referring to the Jews and Gentiles that come to believe in Yeshua. And there's a partial element of truth into that, and then about 85% lie. So a teeny bit of truth with 90% lie, you end up with 90 degrees in the wrong direction. Again, it crept in the early days as a result of the Greek Gnostic influence of the church. There was a very deliberate effort early on in the church through the Alexandrian school. Alexandria was a hotbed of Greek philosophical learning, and so it was one of the capitals of the early Christian church. This was not something that just happened by accident. There was a deliberate effort among some teachers to introduce Greek philosophical teaching and intermingle that with Christianity, and the end result is we end up... replacement theology is like this, Paul. Let's just say you have an individual and he's married, and he writes a whole bunch of love letters to his wife. And then he gets divorced and he marries someone else, or she dies. And then the new wife finds all these love letters and says, "Oh, you wrote me all these love letters." No, those love letters are not written for you. They were written for someone else. And so what happens is Christians, we read the Old Testament, they go, "Oh, it's talking about us." No, it's not talking about you. It's talking about Israel. And yes, you can learn things about the one that wrote them, and you can understand that he would feel that way toward you as well. But ultimately, it's taking something out of its original context and reading it in an improper way.
All right, everybody, there it was. This is Joel Richardson. Get to his website, check out his information. Just so important and impressive information by Joel. Go to his website, joelstrumpet.com. This is Paul Neeson and Joel Richardson with Torah Life Ministries and Joel's Trumpet saying, stay in the Word, keep the faith, read the Torah, understand Yeshua Messiah's words, and act on it, and you will be blessed. Till then, peace.
Amen.
Seek the truth, avoid the evil, learn Yahweh's way.